not.
Are they?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the April 13th, 2015 meeting of the Fayetteville Planning Commission. If you will, take this opportunity to silence your cell phones. And I also want to introduce a couple of our newest commission members. We have Matt Hoffman to my left and Mr. Tom Brown to the right. So with that, Mr. Garner, would you please take the roll?
Hoskins,
Here.
Chesser,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Cook. Present. Hoffman,
Here.
Bunch,
Here.
Noble,
Here.
Selby,
Here.
Autry.
Here.
All right. We have two items on the consent agenda. Item number one is approval of the minutes for the March 23rd, 2015 meeting. Item number two is vacation 15-5001, submitted by Bates & Associates for properties located at 4331 North Waterside Court. The properties are zoned RO residential office and contain approximately 0.95 acres. The request is to vacate a portion of an existing 24-foot access easement contained within the said properties.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Cook.
make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Cook and a second by Commissioner Selby. Mr. Garner.
Hoskins,
Yes?
Chesser,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to new business. Administrative item 15-5023, submitted by USI Engineers for property located at 4436 East Mission Boulevard. The property is in the Fayetteville planning area and contains approximately 7.66 acres. The request is for Planning Commission determination of street connectivity for a new subdivision. Mr. Garner.
Yes, this property is located at 4436 East Mission Boulevard. It's just east of Oakland Zion Road. It is outside the city limits of Fayetteville, and the the development on this site has gone through the Washington County Quorum Court to receive a conditional use permit a couple of months ago because the lots proposed in the subdivision are less than 1 acre. And so they have gone through that initial step. They do have to go through the City of Fayetteville Development Review because they are within our planning area and within 1 mile of the city. So we have jurisdiction over subdivision regulations and street standards and street connectivity policy and ordinances. And before this developer moves forward with full engineering design of the subdivision, they wanted the Planning Commission determination on appropriate street connectivity, and that will change up how they design their detention ponds. And they have to comply with our stormwater ordinances as well. And you can see that here's the proposed subdivision. Stormwater detention is proposed over on this area at this time. If the Planning Commission requires stub outs in this direction, they'll have to re-engineer the project. And so that's why they're before the Commission before they move too far along in the city's development review process. And you can see from looking at the aerial photo, this area is an unincorporated county. The area is, to the east, is largely undeveloped. To the north, there's some larger single-family lots, and then to the west there's an undeveloped area that has a pond, and then here down to the west is some storage units. And so looking at street connections and street connectivity, we feel like the stub out to the east is appropriate. We feel like this is a developable piece of property in the future where we'd want a street connection. To the north, because these lots are already developed with single-family homes on subdivided here, we're not recommending another street connection to the north. If these lots ever decided to split further, they could access this private drive and come out here to Oakland Zion Road. And so the only street stub out proposed is to the east. You will see here on the subdivision road coming in here to the south. They do have access to this western property here, could tie into the street if they desired. And given the generally undeveloped nature of this area and the limited future for development in surrounding areas, we're not recommending additional street stub outs other than what the applicant is proposing. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present, please? If you will, sir, give us your name and whatever else you'd like to add.
My name is Ferdy Forey,
with USI Engineers. And I guess we would still be, just to point out, that we would still be providing the connection to the east. It's just the one connection that we would delete to benefit the design of that detention pond.
Thank you, sir. If we have any questions, we'll call you back.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Is there any member of the audience that'd like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners. There's a deafening
Questions?
silence. Commissioner Cook.
So what's labeled here as Trough Springs Road is a private drive?
It is private drive.
It is private, okay. That was my question.
Anyone else? Any motions? Please? Pretty please?
Well, I guess I'll make a motion. I'm usually I usually require more connectivity, I have to admit, but I think I see staff's point on this based on what's already there, and seeing how that's a private drive too kind of changed my mind a little bit, I have to admit, so. I'll make a motion to approve ADM 15-5023, agreeing with staff's recommendations of the street connectivity.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Cook and a second by Commissioner Selby. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins?
Yes.
Jesser?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, conditional use permit 15-5000 submitted by Bates and Associates for properties located at 4301, 4331 Waterside Court. The properties are zoned RO residential office and contain approximately .95 acres. The request is for additional parking on the property. Mr. Garner.
Yes, sir. This property consists of lots 17 and 18 in the Timberlake Office Park subdivision. It is zoned RO residential office. Contains just under an acre. The applicant is requesting to construct a new office building with 31 parking spaces, which is 7 more than allowed by code. And I'll pull up the site plan here. As you can see in your staff report, the parking requirements for an office are 1 space per every 300 square feet. And due to the nature of this business that has a fairly large number of office workers and clients coming in to the office, they need more parking spaces than the code would allow. And I feel like in this case, they've provided the justification that they need the parking spaces. They already have an existing business in Fayetteville on Crossover Road, and they have a set number of employees and things like that. So this is a case where it's appropriate to give a conditional use in our opinion. As part of the conditional use approval, because of the additional parking, they will have to do some environmental features into the parking lot. Some low-impact development stormwater techniques will be included, including a bioswale, and a couple of additional trees are required to be planted as well. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garner. Is the applicant present, please? Oh, we have 2 applicants. Who's going to give away? If you will, give us your name, ma'am, and whatever else you'd like to add.
I'm Melissa Sims. Just to reiterate what Mr. Garner said, we have an existing business, and we will have 20 employees in offices at the new building, and there's 20 offices in the new building. So it's not cubicles, they're actual offices. It's a 5,580 square foot building. There are also 2 receptionists and a full-time file clerk. So that brings us to 23 employees. So with the allotted 24 parking spaces, that only gives us 1 space for customers. We actually have over 5,000 customers with our insurance business. So it's very likely that we could have 4 to 5 existing customers, 2 or 3 new customers in at one time. So with the request of 31 parking spaces, we're requesting essentially 8 parking spaces for our customers. And we feel that that's really necessary. At our existing building that we're in, we have 46 parking spaces in all. So 31 is already coming down from that. So That's why we need them. If you have any other questions.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Is there any member of the audience like to speak to this item?
Just one being accessible.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. We want to talk about carpooling?
Mr. Chair, just like to ask Urban Forestry, 2 trees, you're comfortable with that? That's perfectly fine as far as you're concerned with the recommendation here? In that case, I would like to make a motion that we approve with conditions, conditional use permit 15-5000 with all approved commissions by planning staff.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Autry and a second by Commissioner Cook. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. On to our next item, conditional use permit 15-5015, submitted by Swope Consulting Engineers for property located at 4420 North Waterside Court. The property is zoned RO residential office and contains approximately .77 acres. The request is for a reduction in the parking space requirements. Mr. Garner, we're moving from one property to the other. Mr. Garner.
Yes, sir. So this is just down the street, another office building in the Timberlake Office Park that is being proposed. Lot 6, again, this is just under 1 acre. The applicant's proposing 5,268 square foot office building. They're proposing a parking lot with 8 vehicular parking spaces, 2 motorcycle spaces, 3 bike racks. That is 6 less spaces than the code requires. And in this particular case, the applicant has submitted information from the property owner describing they have a unique business on the other side. They do not have customers that come in. They have a set number of office employees, so they do not need the extra parking. And so we're recommending in favor of the proposal. We don't want them to build parking lots that are not used, and it's costs more money for them, and also the environmental impacts of the excess pavement. So we're recommending approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Is the applicant present, please? If you would, sir, give us your name and whatever you might want to add.
Phil Swope. I guess we can, I don't really have much to add, but we'll make up for the extra parking lot you allowed over across the street. So.
There you go. Okay, thank you, sir. All right. Is there any member of the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Cook?
So, question for staff, just heaven forbid, let's say this business decided they moved out and somebody else moved in and wanted to repurpose it for something that required more parking, and they needed to add parking or something, what would be the process for that? Just,
Depending on how many spaces they would need to add, they would have to turn in a parking lot permit, basically, and go through the technical plat committee to add some more parking spaces.
if that happened, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chesser?
question for staff. Mr. Garner, you're not requiring any kind of a shared use agreement or anything, you're just saying it's fine for them to go ahead and use the spaces.
Yes.
Given the proximity of this location to the trail, I don't know what the clientele of this office is, but I know the trails are being used more and more, and this is the direction I'd prefer to see parking go, fewer rather than more if possible. So in general, I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chesser?
seeing no other comments, and given my last comment, I'm going to move that we approve CUP 15-5015 with staff recommendations of approval.
Second.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Hoffman. Sorry about that. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, on to the next item, large-scale development 15-4970, submitted by CEI Engineering for property located at the northwest corner of MLK and Government Avenue. Property is zone C2, thoroughfare commercial. It contains approximately 6.1 acres. The request is for a 43,101 square foot grocery store with associated parking. Mr. Fulcher, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this property was rezoned back in December of 2014. It's at Martin Luther King, Hill Avenue, and Government Avenue, with access to each of the three sites. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing warehouse buildings on the property and construct a 42,000 square foot grocery store with about 215 parking spaces. This was turned in, I believe, in February. We've been through several revisions with the applicant. I think with technical plat review on 2 occasions, and we're at subdivision committee about a week and a half ago. 3 of our commissioners were able to review the project and provide some feedback on the site, particularly on the building design. There were 4 findings that we were discussing at that meeting. I think a number of revisions to the architectural they were proposing as far as the design of the building have been made, and so we'll discuss those as well. Certainly, there's been several revisions since the technical plat review meeting as well. They did conduct a traffic study with this development. It's a large development at 42,000 square feet. It'll generate about 3,600 new vehicle trips, so 4,400 total, but brand new trips to the site that don't currently come to this location. The number's about 3,600. The traffic study does recommend significant improvements to Hill Avenue along with what staff's been recommending. And again, that's been part of the ongoing revisions what the applicant is working on. Street improvements adjacent to the site to make sure that the adjacent streets continue to function well and traffic is distributed. Tree preservation is also an item they've been working on since the technical plat review meeting. They've increased their tree preservation numbers since our original review. Our urban forester, Ken Easton, is here, can speak to that as well as the landscape plan. But their existing canopy is about 28%. They're required to maintain 15% of that, and they are below that, and they're at 9.3%, so about 5.5% below. That results in 42-inch caliper trees to be planted on site, and urban forestry is supportive of the plan they've shown. Again, that's gone through several revisions and really focusing on the highest quality canopy on the north end of the site adjacent to the railroad tracks. As far as the traffic study goes, I'd like to go through a number of findings on that. That's under condition number 2. That's really been one of our main focuses because Hill Avenue in particular experiences quite a bit of congestion during AM and PM peak hours, and then in between classes. There's a bus stop there for the university. There's a large student housing complex to the south on Hill Street, another one over off of Government as well. So there's quite a bit of traffic through this area, and then there's a railroad crossing as well. For Hill Avenue, they'll be constructing a southbound turn lane. So you'll have 2 southbound lanes. That would require them to upgrade the signal heads and relocate the signals and the signal equipment as well. They'll be reconstructing 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of Hill Avenue, and ultimately they're going to have to obtain additional right-of-way. Hill Avenue, unlike most of the streets in this area, does not have sufficient right-of-way for these types of improvements. So we're looking at about 55 feet of right-of-way to get all of these improvements in. They have been in contact with the property owners on both sides of Hill Avenue. They initially agreed, or at least stated that they were interested in allowing Walmart to complete these improvements, but it would be up to the applicant to obtain this right-of-way from those adjacent property owners. So we're hopeful that they will be able to obtain that, and of course they would not be able to proceed through construction until those agreements were in place and the city was satisfied that the improvements could be made. Of course, if the improvements can't be made, then we may have to come back to the Planning Commission to discuss this further, but as it is right now, we feel that things are moving in the right direction and they'll be able to obtain those agreements. On Martin Luther King, they'll be constructing a new 5-foot sidewalk at the right-of-way line. There is one property at the corner of Hill and Martin Luther King that the applicants do not own, an existing office complex there, so they'll have to work with them as far as getting that sidewalk away from Martin Luther King, and we've noted that in our conditions just as far as feasible from the roadway given the slope into that site. On Government Avenue, it's actually about 36 feet wide, so there's really no street widening that would have to occur there. It's really about modifications to the existing street. They'd be constructing new 8-foot sidewalks. That's a downtown street section. It's part of the downtown master plan area, and so that does require 8-foot sidewalks with tree wells and street trees every 30 feet. They've also agreed to install structural soil continuously under this area versus for each individual tree well. And then on-street parking currently exists on both sides of the street. They'll be maintaining that on-street parking. We just ask that it be striped prior to completion of the project. On Prairie Street, this intersects the north end of their property. We feel we'll see quite a bit of traffic coming over from School Avenue. They'll be reconstructing the existing Frisco Trail crossing into a raised crosswalk. That'll serve more of speed reduction through that area, and be installing Shero bike symbols for bicyclists coming down from the trail to the site. And then there's a small sidewalk connection there near Gregg Street that they'll complete. Full cutoff streetlights will be installed, of course, at each street intersection and at the intersections to their site. Right-of-way dedication, the amount of 55 feet will be required along Hill and 43.5 feet on the north side of Martin Luther King, and a crosswalk will be installed on Government Avenue on the north side of Martin Luther King. The subdivision committee did find in favor of all those street improvements. I believe the applicant's in agreement with all those as well. Back to item number 1 on determination of commercial design standards. The subdivision committee had a number of recommendations, and if we could pull those most recent elevations up. Really on the east and west sides of the building. The east side of the building faces Government Avenue. The west side faces Hill Avenue, and we've discussed how visible that elevation will be. If you've been able to look at the renderings and the grading planes, you can see that they're doing quite a bit of cut into the site. And so there's tall retaining walls on the west side of the property and the north side of the property. So that side of the building will sit down on the site quite a bit from the drivers and pedestrians on Hill Avenue. But they have incorporated quite a few revisions on that side, including some additional windows. We feel that the east and west side, as well as the south side, meet the minimum requirements of our commercial design standards. One of the main discussion points with staff and the applicant over the last few months has been on the government side. Commercial design standards state that you are to have an articulated building and a predominant entry feature. And that's really been the struggle, is that they are attempting not to lure their customers over onto the side of the building where they can't get in. They have service doors over there for back of house activities, but they really don't want their customers trying to enter near the pharmacy drive-through lane. They want them to come in the only location to enter for the public, which is on the south side of the building. So we've been struggling to make it a well-articulated facade. A prominent entry really helps articulate a facade. So we've been working with them to improve that side of the building. We feel that they have. There's not a prominent entrance over there. There is an entrance. They have somewhat defined it by trying to limit it so the public don't try to use it, but they've added quite a few windows, some pilasters, and some other material changes since the subdivision committee meeting, and we do feel that it does meet the minimum requirements at this time. Item number 3 is variance of access management. We've discussed on a number of projects, especially along principal arterial roadways. Access management code prohibits a curb cut onto the arterial roadway if they have access to other streets. They have access to 2 streets, Hill Avenue and Government Avenue. However, in this situation, we're actually looking for a way to distribute some of the traffic away from those 2 side streets. If this were a smaller development, we feel confident that those 2 side streets could handle that much traffic, but with 3,600 new vehicle trips, I think those streets would be overwhelmed by the number of people using the site, and so we felt that it was necessary to have a 3/4 access onto Martin Luther King Boulevard. That would prohibit the left turn out, which is where you're trying to go across 2 oncoming lanes, a turn lane, and then merge into the other eastbound lanes. So it's extremely difficult movement to make in most situations. So we've restricted that through the 3/4 access, but it would allow the right in, the right out, in the left end. There's a 2-way left turn lane along this section of roadway. There's really not a lot of conflict points. On their side of the street, it's really going to be the only curb cut. Again, the office building there at the corner has a driveway, but it's extraordinarily steep, so it's really not used. So it will really be the only curb cut used on the north side of the road. So it'll limit the number of conflict points that you would normally see along a busy roadway like Martin Luther King. So we are supportive of the 3/4 access that they are proposing. Again, because it's a state highway, the design of that is a little bit restricted, but we'd like to continue to work with them and make sure that there's a very restrictive turn so we don't have the people attempting to turn left out of the site. And then item number 4 is somewhat of a standard variant request that we'll see for delivery truck areas. So they'll have their 18-wheelers coming in the back of the site off of Government and then leaving back onto Government. And so they've requested a larger radius for that curb that allows those semis to be able to turn out of there without driving over the curb and sidewalk. So we're recommending in favor of that variance of the curb radius requirement. Under item number 5, in accordance with the bill of assurance that was approved with the rezoning, they'll be installing a bike repair station and transit station there on Government Avenue. We discussed that a little bit at subdivision committee. I think everyone felt that the Government Avenue is where the applicant would like to put it, and I think where the subdivision committee felt it was most appropriate as well. Ozark Regional Transit had stated that they would reroute around 1 block off of Martin Luther King to come down Government, so they said they can make that work. Razorback is not changing their routes. They currently come downhill from campus and take a right, so they wouldn't be able to utilize this location. Also, street trees would be placed in between the sidewalk and curb along Martin Luther King, where there's room where there's not utility conflict. So they've shown that for the most of that street frontage, but there are some utility conflicts, so they've moved the trees back behind the sidewalk in those locations. And then items 8 and 9. 8 is a vegetative screen, so there are 2 homes to the north of this property. They're not zoned residential, but they're residential uses. The code does require that they provide a vegetative screen in that area. They have shown that. And item 10 is rooftop screening, just to point out that there's residences to the north, and the grades at that point is where those properties are actually going to be looking about the roof line of the building. And so they've agreed, as they're required to put rooftop screening on that elevation, which you would normally see on the back of a building, but in this case it is necessary, and that's item 9. A couple other standard conditions under 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12, but really design standards and street improvements are the big items I think we've been discussing throughout this project. We've included excerpts from the traffic study as well, all the revised elevations. So if the commission has any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Folger. Is the applicant present, please? If you will, sir, give us your name and would you like to
Good evening, Commission. My name's Tom Burry. I'm with CEI Engineering, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. All right. Is there any member of the public like to speak to this item? Surprises me. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners?
Question for the applicant, please. What will be your height and material on your retaining wall over there on the west side?
Currently, the heights are 10-foot max. It's a requirement by the city. They're tiered 10 feet apart. They're not all 10 feet tall, but that's the max. Material, we're currently working that out. It's probably going to be a modular block. Well, we're calling out soil nail wall to preserve the trees, but they do have facing that you can put a nice look to it, stamped concrete look. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you think? It's good.
Yeah, I just, when we looked at this at subdivision, I see you've got the sidewalk added in here that we talked about off Hill Street, yep. That's probably a pretty good grade on that, but you did add it in there, I appreciate that. I can't remember, we talked about, was it the west elevation? I can't remember what changed. I don't remember what the original elevation looked like.
East and west. East and west.
East
East and west. They added windows to the,
They did, okay. I couldn't remember what the original one looked like. That was it, really. I was more concerned about the connection, pedestrian connection to Hill Street. We fielded several comments from neighbors around there talking about the construction of the project, and we talked about that at subdivision. I don't guess we'll talk about that here, but I think they heard what their concerns were. The shade, we talked about the shading for the homes to the north there that was in there, and the commercial design standards. Other than that, I don't have any issue from a planning perspective.
At the subdivision committee, we had talked about the east and west elevations, and of course, I think Jesse and I disagree with what's going to be visible from Hill Street, especially if you have 10-foot retaining walls and they're stepped back. And they've added glazing to the east elevation. The forward half was what we kind of expected, and looks like they even went beyond that a little bit. So the east elevation, or the west elevation, I'm sorry, looks pretty good in my opinion. And then we had spoke about the Government Street elevation, or the east elevation, and one of the points of contention was something that looked like a primary entrance. And we had suggested glazing on that side of the building, which they've added, which again looks very good. I'm a little disappointed to see that they did not do something that would at least somewhat mimic or at least use some glazing or what have you, on a little bit larger scale that might mimic a storefront entrance or what have you. On the east elevation, it kind of, up on the front corner, it would be the south end of the building. east elevation, that area there where the darker block comes up and over the lighter color block, just looks weird to me. It looks like it used to be an entrance and somebody blocked it in. It just looks like it's kind of unfriendly to me, and then back here where the awning is, at the north end of the west elevation, you have a similar thing, an awning there with with really no purpose for it being there from an architectural point of view anyway. And again, looks like a entrance that's been blocked up. But anyway, I personally would have liked to have seen at least some larger scale glazing there that, and I would understand not wanting to run that glazing all the way to the ground, because then it might give people the idea that it is an entrance. But if it was held up to the level of the mud sill between the lower stone and the upper block, just in that area or what have you, I think it would have been a lot nicer looking facade. And I drove down there, and it's extremely visible, so just my opinion.
Mr. Hoskins, I have a comment. Actually, a question for the staff. I understand that a lot of attention was given to the tree canopy along Martin Luther King. Are we confident, given the caliper and the on-center spacing of those trees, that we're going to be providing a consistent canopy as is shown in the renderings, or is that something that we're going to have to wait 15 years for?
Mr. Easton, if you would help us out with that.
You're talking about the new street trees, correct? Yeah. Okay. Well, minimum size is 2-inch, about 10 to 12 foot tall, so yeah, it's going to be a few years down the road before they're actually mature trees.
Okay. So does anybody know exactly what the on-center spacing for those is?
30 foot is the maximum.
30 foot, and they've elected to go with the maximum spacing?
Yes, actually, it may be slightly closer in some places.
Okay.
And because of utilities right out in the right-of-way between the curb and the sidewalk, they will have to be staggered back behind the sidewalk. The west end will be between the curb and the sidewalk. The east end on the east side of the driveway will be back behind the sidewalk.
I understand.
That's the current plan.
Well, I certainly, given the fact that the building sits so far back from the street, I certainly would prefer to see, something where we create a more consistent street edge with the landscaping there.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chesser.
I missed the meeting where the rezone for this property was, but would have fallen on the side of preferring a more urban addressing of the street. Since it is C2, I guess I feel like we're kind of doing as best as we can. That's not true. It's not doing the best that it can, but I'm not sure. I guess I feel like this facade meets the minimum requirements. I would prefer, I'm not going to say that. I agree generally with Mr. Hoffman. I feel like this has turned what could be an interesting urban experience into, more kind of typical parking lot addressing the street. But I'm not sure there's anything we can do at this point in this body. While I agree with the chair on his comments regarding the architectural features of the east facade, I'm sorry, what is it, the east facade?
Yes.
I don't know what to do about it. I feel like they meet the minimum requirements, and unless the city wants to raise those requirements, which I would be in support of, I'm not sure we're able to do anything here. So I'm probably going to give my grudging support. Thank you.
Please, Mr.
Just for the new commissioners, because I think the old commissioners have probably heard this, but the Supreme Court has said that when a subdivision ordinance specifies minimum standards to which a preliminary plat or a large-scale development must conform, it is arbitrary as a matter of law to deny approval of that plat that meets those standards. So I think you're absolutely right, Commissioner Chesser, that the discretion is basically during the rezoning, and where the city council has much more power. You can make recommendations, but the city council has much more power at that point to kind of set the standards. And then once it's zoned, as long as they're meeting the standards of the development ordinance, which staff tells you that they have, then it must be approved at this stage of the game. You cannot go back and decide that you would rather apply your discretion and say that, you know, this is not something you like if it meets the ordinance.
Mr. Autry.
I do agree with the previous two comments by the previous two commissioners. I mean, there's not going to be a perfect solution to this. I think compared to what it's going to look like going down Martin Luther King to the current condition, plus the improvements that are going to happen at all of these, at Hill and Government, Prairie Streets, and on Martin Luther King, that's going to look better than existing. So it's not perfect. That east elevation is not perfect, but I think people are pretty familiar with neighborhood markets, and I mean, everybody's been in hundreds of them, hundreds of times, so I would be in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask a question?
You're the chair.
I guess I can, well, I guess I can then. Mr. Fulcher, as far as along the line of thinking of Commissioner Hoffman, it does seem kind of weird to me to be staggering those trees back and forth on either side of the sidewalk up and down Martin Luther King. I understand why the trees are behind the sidewalk on the eastern half of the project. On the western half of the project, could those trees, as a matter of continuity, could those trees be placed behind the sidewalk as well, or would that mess up your design or anything, or?
Yeah, you might want to ask the...
Yeah, there he is. I was looking for him. Mr. Architect, could you answer that question, if you give us your name too, sir?
I believe we were requested to get them as close as possible, but as you stated,
Oh, yeah, okay.
there's utilities on the east side, so we pushed those back. We are also working with HTD, who is compliant with the city to move them as close as possible, but they'd prefer they not be there either. I mean, we could move them. There's area to move them, obviously, but it was a request by the city, and we tried to get them as close to the curb as possible.
Okay.
Mr. Hopkins, if I may explain a little bit further, if the commissioners were not aware, when Walmart proposed for this property to be rezoned, they offered a bill of assurance that stated that they would try to plant the street trees in between the curb and the sidewalk along Martin Luther King, with the intent of trying to create a pedestrian streetscape where you have, you know, pedestrians separated from cars by a row of trees. So that was the intent that Walmart wanted to offer when they proposed the rezoning. However, during review of the technical development specs, there's utilities that prevent that from happening along this section of the site, which is unfortunate, that you cannot have that continuous alley of trees walking down the sidewalk there. So
We got halfway
that's
there.
where we're at.
We got halfway there. Okay.
If I could just offer some clarification on my comments as well. I'm not so concerned about, you know, some of the trees being closer to the street than other of the trees. I'm more concerned about the large space in between the trees. You know, I would just hope that the applicant would consider moving beyond the minimums as far as on-center spacing and maybe look at also using a different caliper in order to make that edge more consistent.
Anybody else? Commissioner Chesser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's probably too late to offer this comment, but I guess it's a question for staff. Andrew, is there a requirement that the sidewalk be within a certain distance? I mean, wondering if the sidewalk could be moved behind the trees on the eastern side. That might be too strange.
No, that would be an option. If the planning commission chose to do that, you would just need to make a determination of street improvements, that you're finding that the sidewalk can be moved outside the right-of-way in a pedestrian access easement, and it could basically run right along the edge of the parking lot. And that would be a potential option. I don't know the exact details of where the utilities are and things like that, so that,
Yeah, I guess I mean, in order to provide more pedestrian comfort, just imagining walking on either side of that entrance, I would rather be on the side with trees protecting me from the high-speed traffic on MLK. And in general, I would prefer to be walking further away from MLK, given there will be no cars parked on the street, and even though there's no building front pushed to the front of the street like I would like to see, if you move the sidewalk back a bit, I'm not going to say park-like, but less high-speed traffic-like walking experience might be enjoyable. So I would certainly like to see something like that. And Mr. Chair, if you would allow it, I'd love to ask the applicant how he would feel about that.
Sure. We need an engineer.
I won't call you an architect. I know how much
Thank
you
you.
guys hate that.
There's an architect here, by the way, but.
Yeah, I know, I saw it.
Yeah.
So how would you feel about, you get my point with that?
I do. I think the only issue we would have with that is it's a public sidewalk, so it would be encroaching further into the property, and we're just losing developable area. It'd be dedicating more property to the city.
And then you wouldn't have to pay as much taxes on it.
That's true.
And let me ask you this, the sidewalk is not over the easements, is it, or is it?
No,
So you might
we're
actually be able-
dedicating new easements.
So you might actually be able to move the trees forward a little bit if you didn't have the sidewalk.
They could possibly be swapped, but the trees are within Walmart's property, and the sidewalk's in the right-of-way currently.
Even on the east side? Or, sorry, I'm turning around. West side, even on the west side?
Correct.
So the trees are
No,
within...
the trees are, sorry, on the west side, the trees are on the right-of-way.
Okay.
You're correct.
So,
This is not something that I don't think the planning commission can require, because our ordinances don't require that. But it could be something that you all would consider, and I think that even if this large-scale development was approved tonight, it could be modified upon the applicant's request with the approval of the planning department. And I think that you make a good point, not only from the traffic, but the sun is in the south too. And so if you want to walk on a sidewalk and be shaded from the sun a little bit, it'd be better if the trees were on the south side of the sidewalk. So,
It's definitely something we can bring back to the client. I mean, I don't think they'll have an issue with it, but
well, that would make me, happier about this project. Can you give me the distance between the curb of MLK and the curb on the back side of the parking lot there? Just ballpark. What are we looking at there? 20, 30 feet?
25 feet about.
25 feet? I just feel like,
I'm sorry, did you say back of curb to the back of curb? Or
back
sidewalk to
curb of MLK to the parking lot side, so that distance.
That's closer to 40 or,
40. So, and is there an elevation change? There's not much elevation change there, is there? From the street to the parking lot, I mean.
it's lowering there a few feet.
It's lowering there,
Yeah.
down into the parking lot.
Correct.
So if you move the sidewalk, with 20 feet to the parking lot, I'm not saying stick to these numbers, but if I feel like a pedestrian with 20 feet to the parking lot and 20 feet to MLK, trees on the MLK side, that feels a lot nicer to me to walk on. And you do have students across the street, close. You do have high school students down the street, pretty close. And I suspect that given how pedestrian access has changed the nature of a lot of businesses in this town, that pedestrian access that felt better your client might be happy with an increase in business. That's a guess, but generally walk scores are a very important thing to take into consider when people plan neighborhoods and businesses. So obviously, we can't, our city attorneys said that we can't require this, but I feel like it would certainly make me happier. I felt like I was getting an indication from some of the other commissioners that it would make them happier. I suspect that it would make citizens who might be pedestrians in this town happier too. So that would make me more comfortable. I understand that you might be uncomfortable dedicating the extra property, but it's just something for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to say one more thing, we do have the bus stops on both Hill and Government, which I think will generate probably the most of the pedestrian traffic, but appreciate the comment, and we'll bring it up.
But before you run off, I want to clarify something, which I think Commissioner Chesser makes a very, very good point, and I appreciate that. It sounds to me like they might potentially be able to do this without actually dedicating property. They could put a pedestrian easement without dedicating the property, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so you don't have to dedicate any more property. Follow me?
I'm with you.
Okay, so that makes it easier for you to do this, okay? Anyway, I just want to make sure that you understood that. It
Nothing
wasn't a
ever
matter
seems
of
to be easy
dedicating
anymore.
more right-of-way or anything like that. Basically, it's just a pedestrian easement. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Any-
Mr. Chair.
Ken, yes, please.
There is an existing 10-foot utility easement just on the north side of that right-of-way line. I don't know if that would preclude the sidewalk, but we don't want to plant trees in that 10-foot utility easement.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, is there any room besides that we can stick a tree in, Ken?
It's getting tight through there.
Okay. I bet you can figure out how to get it done. Anyway, okay. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Bunch.
I have a question, and I cannot find the item now, about the trail crossing on the prairie, and I guess this is for staff. Sorry, this would be for staff. That's going to be raised up. Is that going to be reflective, or is it anything, other than just the raised up area?
Haven't got to that level of detail, but we'd certainly have our trails coordinator look at it and try to keep it consistent with other trail crossings. So if reflective markers help out, and that's something that we commonly do with our projects, and we'd ask them to do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the note.
Mr. Chair.
Chesser. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
That's all you get rid of.
Well, I hope the applicant will remember what I've said as I move to approve. Let's see, are there any findings or anything, Jesse?
Commercial design standards, street improvements.
Four findings, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to move that we approve LSD 15-4970. Oops. Sorry. Get to my conditions. Oh, come on.
Page 3 of 43.
It's just, I'm slow, is the problem. Finding in favor of the determination that the elevations are acceptable in terms of the commercial design standards. Finding in favor of the determination regarding street improvements. Number 2, finding in favor of the proposed driveway. And number 3, and finding in favor of the variance mentioned in number 4. And there's no finding for number 5, I guess?
No, sir.
Okay. And otherwise agreeing with staff's recommendations of approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Autry. Mr. Arnold?
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. They did better this time through.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Next item on the agenda is rezoning 15-4965 submitted by, excuse me, I skipped one. Let's rewind. Item number 7, rezoning 15-5004 submitted by Jorgensen and Associates for property located at the south end of Pumpkin Ridge Drive. The property is zoned RA, residential agriculture, and contains approximately 17.37 acres. The request is to rezone the property to RSF2, residential single-family, 2 units per acre. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is property south of Stonebridge Meadows Golf Course and Subdivision. It's about 400 feet south of Pumpkin Ridge Drive, which stubs out from Stonebridge Meadows. The property is heavily wooded and located mostly within the Hillside Hilltop Overlay District. Property was previously zoned for a residential plan zoning district, a customized zoning that was approved back in 2005. The details on that were 258 lots, a density of about 2 units per acre. So similar to the density we're discussing this evening. That was over 137 acres at the time. Because the property was never developed, the PZD expired, which left the property without any development rights. And so around 2011, staff went through quite a few of the expired plan zoning districts that hadn't been constructed and recommended rezoning to the Planning Commission, to the City Council. This property was recommended and approved to be rezoned back to residential agricultural at that time. The property owners are now requesting to rezone a portion of the original project, about 17.5 acres, from residential agricultural to RSF2, 2 units per acre. The minimum lot size for that zoning district is about 17,800 square feet per lot with 100 feet of street frontage. The future land use map, City Plan 2030, identifies this area as a rural residential area, which recognizes existing low-density development, but is identified to encourage conservation and preservation of woodlands, grasslands, and agricultural properties. In our review of the findings, we do not feel that this zoning is consistent with the land use policies and objectives. The property is near an existing subdivision that was developed in the early 2000s, but it's really surrounded by large undeveloped or rurally developed properties, large forested properties, and the existing zoning is actually more compatible than upzoning this property to RSF2. The rural designation or rural residential designation is about preserving these woodlands, not developing them, and we feel that the RSF2 zoning would allow more suburban development and densities along a wooded hillside. Another concern that we don't often talk about is infrastructure costs and what those mean long-term. You'll note that we made some comments about that. This is about 34 houses, the maximum density that can be built under RSF2 zoning. To support those 34 homes would require about 2,500 linear feet of new water line, sewer line, and street, and sidewalks on both sides. Ultimately, that cost is borne by the developer on the front end, but that becomes a long-term maintenance responsibility and perpetuity for the city and the public. That's a lot of infrastructure for a few number of houses. Of course, leaving it RA doesn't necessarily solve that problem. RA still allows development. Every piece of property in the city of Fayetteville has development rights. So I'm not saying that leaving it RA necessarily solves the problem of having infrastructure that we'll have to maintain, we being the public, over a long period of time, but it's about the encouragement of density and development in this area and what that may do to adjacent properties and the type of policy decision that we're setting here. And so I think what we wrapped up with on some of our findings really was the policy decision. Back in 2005, this area was noted as a residential area on our future land use map, and I think the Falling Waters development followed in that accordingly. Since that time and since that property or that project expired, the Planning Commission and City Council made a decision to change the policy of how we wanted to see this area of the city develop, and the designation was changed back to a rural designation. At this point, RA is the most rural designation that we have, even though it does allow development of 2 units per acre. Some may not consider that necessarily rural, but it is the most rural designation that we have in our zoning code. It's really about should this area and areas like this be rezoned to RSF2. In our review of this particular property, we feel that upzoning property to allow more density, suburban densities, and though RSF2 doesn't sound real suburban, 18,000 square foot lots aren't that much bigger than what's developed in standard RSF4 subdivision, which in my opinion are developed in about the 10,000 square foot range. So it's still a fairly high suburban density, even though it's only 2 units per acre. So overall, we do not support the rezoning request and recommend that the Planning Commission recommend denial as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is the applicant present, please? If you will, sir, give us your name and what you'd like to add.
My name's Dave Jorgensen, and on behalf of the owners, I'm here to present this rezoning request to you. It's hard to believe that back in 2005, that's been 10 years ago, that this project was approved. 137 acres, 2 units per acre. Hard to believe it's been that long ago. Here we are before you requesting that, as Jesse mentioned, 17 and a half acres about is our request for RSF2, 2 lots per acre, which is roughly 2 times bigger than what the standard lot is in Fayetteville. If you'll look at the your packet, you'll notice on page 13, actually page 10 of your packet, kind of gives a pretty good graphic representation of where this property is with respect to the rest of the world. You'll notice that subject property, that funny shaped piece right there, and then right north of it is that light green RA, that's the golf course. And slightly to the northeast is Stonebridge Meadows Phase 1 through 5, all RSF4. Our street would connect to Pumpkin Ridge right there and extend into this project right here. Go straight west, and you'll see a big old orange area right there that's RSF4, that is River Meadows. I'm sorry, Riverwalk subdivision. Several phases planned right there, of which the first phase right there is RSF4, and it's already installed. So it's not quite as far-fetched as what you would think. And this request is just for 17 and a half acres RSF2, 17,000 something square feet on the lot sizes. I have the owners here that would like to speak pertaining to this right here, and then I'm here to answer questions on it.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen.
Hello, I'm Clay Carlton. I'm one of the owners, and the other one's back here in the back, and also happen to be one of the owners of Buffington Homes. And so we'll be building all of the homes on this as well, and know that we'll have to adhere to the Hillside Overlay District. And it's not our intention to go in and cut down all the trees. Not that we could anyway, but just wanted to point out on a couple of these items where it says that the property doesn't hit services. We actually do border Pumpkin Ridge, so we would be the ones, you can't really see it, but our property runs all the way to Pumpkin Ridge, where there is water and sewer, and so we would be the ones, paying to extend that throughout the layout. And that's, whichever zoning it ends up being, we'll still be the ones paying for that. Back in 2006, whenever we originally were going to start this project, we went along with Bill Meadows, who owns the golf course, and he's developed the first 5 phases of Stonebridge Meadows. And we basically went from the industrial park, and we bored under the White River and ran water and sewer to all of this area with the intention of building it out. So we have a tremendous investment in that. I don't remember the exact amount, but don't really want to think about it either. It was a lot of money. So we actually extended water and sewer to both ends of the property. So all the utilities are there, and it was all sized for, a certain number of homes. I don't know that I have a whole lot else to add other than that 2 units per acre. We're trying to build towards the market, and that's what we're having a lot of people ask for. Our company is also involved in infill developments, and we like doing those too, and we have We have one going in on the Cottages Old right now, and that's a infill development, and it's dense. We did the Lakewood subdivision on Zion Road, if you are aware of that one. That one's very dense. So, we like building in different markets, and right now the market is telling us, a lot of people are wanting these size lots. And so, kind of our vision for the property is for it to be more like Mount Sequoia lots. So, in size, and, try to maximize the views that we have, maintain as many trees as possible, probably even more so than what the hillside would even allow for. We'll be building all the homes in it as well, so we'll be able to govern that, and we'll have covenants in place. So, unless you have any questions for me, that's what I wanted to point out.
If we do, we'll call you back up.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to this item? Okay. If you will, just step up to the microphone, give us your name, and if you will, keep your comments as brief and to the point as possible, and try not to repeat the person that came before you, okay?
My name is Casey Weathers. I live in the vicinity in Stonebridge Meadows, and I have some serious concerns about the ingress and egress only being adopted through the Stonebridge Meadows subdivision off of Pumpkin Ridge Drive. We currently have a traffic issue as it speaks with coming into and out of the subdivisions from Dead Horse Mountain to Golf Farm into all phases of the subdivision, excuse me, and even exiting out of the Roberts Road. The more they build into that subdivisions, the phases, and then the adjacent subdivisions coming into the area, where the traffic loading already has become a problem with the 1.5 lane bridge on Golf Farm Road to the deep ditches and whatnot on Dead Horse Mountain and on Roberts Road. I just have some traffic concerns about this being the only ingress and egress coming into the subdivision. Originally, the subdivision was going to be accessed off of Dead Horse Mountain being the main entrance. Now, I have no problem with the subdivision going on up on the hillside. I would like to see there be two entrances, and the one coming through the current fulfilled subdivision being a secondary emergency entrance instead of being the primary.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
My name is Jay Ray, and I live on Cherry Hills Drive, which intersects Pumpkin Ridge at the very end where the stop sign is that nobody pertains to want to stop. And I concur with everything that Casey said. The traffic is terrible. The bridge is historical. It can't be changed. Roberts is torn slap up from all the traffic until they got the light out on Stonebridge off of 16. So everybody uses that road, and the traffic is just terrible. So I concur with what Casey said.
Thank you, sir. Who else?
Hi, my name's Larry Altman, and I live at the intersection of Pumpkin Ridge and Cherry Hill, about one house removed from the intersection there. My primary concern is the drainage issues involved with coming down from the mountain where the proposed building of the houses are going to be. We already have drainage problems out there. It's flooded seriously in 2008. There's a lot of water coming down from that hill, and the golf course already floods. The golf course is behind our house. Whenever it rains, it immediately turns into a lake. So one of our primary concerns has to do with the drainage coming off of the hillside there where they're proposing to build. And just putting the road through there is going to eliminate a lot of trees. Just building the road. I can't imagine that there would be many trees left when you come off of Pumpkin Ridge and that narrow space between where the farm is on the east side and where the golf course is on the west side. So it's going to be mostly road there, and there's going to be an awful lot of trees removed, and not even to mention the 35 homes that are going to be built off of that small area. Also, the size of the houses that are being proposed to be built is also a concern. It's considerably smaller than all of the other homes out in Stonebridge Meadows. So, and of course, not to repeat, but the traffic issue is going to be a big issue there. With the only means of ingressing would be through mostly Cherry Hills, which is the street that I live on. And I'm wondering also what large equipment trucks, when they're building, is going to do to Cherry Hills Drive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Wanda Altman, and I live on Cherry Hills Drive. I agree with everything that has been said, but I would like to reiterate about some environmental concerns. Someone addressed that it's not that different and it's not that far-fetched from some, I believe he was talking about over on Dead Horse Mountain, but actually it is quite different. We're talking about a mostly undeveloped mountainside, wooded, natural creeks, wildlife. It's a mountainside, and that also would address the flooding issue. The water is going to come down and hit that street just like a water slide because there's quite a bit of a climb and an incline from Cherry Hills up to, I believe, the third or the fourth golf hole where this is going to be going. So I think flooding is going to be an issue, but it's going to be a huge impact on environmental issues. It is going to drastically change the landscape of that beautiful natural area that I think Fayetteville Planning Commission is concerned about preserving. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gregory Carter, and I also live on Cherry Hills Drive. And I concur with everything that the other residents have spoken to. And the only other consideration that I wish we would consider is the property value because of the amount of traffic that's put on there and the size of the home and the lots. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Well, let's get some things cleared up first. Okay, ingress and egress, Jesse. I'm not positive on the zoning action that we're even supposed to be discussing this or what have you, because if they got it zoned to whatever they wanted and they didn't have enough ingress and egress, then their large scale, or their preliminary plat wouldn't get approved, I suppose.
Yeah, a number of the issues that were brought up, I think are related to the zoning. That is, increasing the density is going to potentially increase the problems or create some of the problems that they're discussing. Certainly traffic will be one of those. More units, the more traffic you're going to have. But yeah, a lot of it is development related as well. So I think you're talking about fire code. There's only so many units that can build with one access into the property, but the fire code could put restrictions on them. So yeah, some of it is development related, but I think it's all kind of related back to what the zoning is of the property.
Okay, but at this time, they can build 1 unit per acre, correct?
1 unit per 2 acres.
Oh, 1 unit per 2 acres, excuse me, okay. All right.
2 units per acre. With their current zoning, current zoning.
Okay. Currently, they can build 1 unit per 2 acres. They're asking for 2 units per 1 acre. Okay, all right. But to build that 1 unit per 2 acres, they would still have to construct a street, so therefore the equipment and the trucks or what have you would have that regardless of what the zoning is. You agree? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, yep. All right, as far as drainage goes, we addressed that at preliminary plat level, and engineering takes a look at studies that thoroughly or what have you, and so that would be addressed at that time as well. Property values or what have you, that's not something that, I don't think that's something that we can discuss here either.
Well, you can, but not the size of houses. We don't know what size the house is going to be.
Right.
Only the zoning.
Right. Okay, and so, Traffic, of course, the traffic would be 4 times greater than what is currently allowed, correct? If the zoning was approved, for the density, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. What else? I think I got everything, I'm not sure. Okay. With that, I'll shut up.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Chesser.
Andrew, you don't happen to have brought the transect with you that shows this area, do you? Have you? You did not anticipate that I would ask about the transect? Can you then pull up page 12-4 from City Plan 2030? It's on page 9 of 13 of my packet. Is that possible?
Sure. What page are you looking for?
The one that talks about rural residential areas.
Okay.
It's section 12-4 of City Plan 2030. While he's pulling that up, the transect is a section that is a land use tool which recommends densities depending on where you are in the city. Higher densities towards city cores and lower densities towards urban cores. And this is labeled as rural residential areas. And I wanted to read real quickly the guiding policies of what should be allowed in that area. And I want you to pay particular attention to the pictures of the cows there on the right. A, allow and encourage historical, agriculture, and related uses to continue and to occur as permanent land uses within planned developments. B, if development, encourage alternative development patterns, such as conservation or cluster development types, to achieve compatibility with surrounding rural areas. C, foster a culture that supports local food production on a variety of scales. D, encourage, preserve, and protect viable agribusinesses, such as orchards, berry farms, and small-scale produce-yielding businesses that provide goods for the local market. Now, typically, I'm a person who is preaching for higher densities, but generally, I'm in favor of those higher densities where appropriate in the transect. To me, this is putting, while it would be a very low density for an urban area subdivision, sort of suburban area, into an area of the transect that to me is meant to be rural, and the city has indicated that it wishes to remain rural. This would be quadrupling the number of units allowed in this area, and given that, I don't see how I can support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Who else? Nobody?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I was impressed with Ms. Altman's comment about the environmental concerns. The city has recognized this area through the overlay process as a valuable resource. When you actually go out there and look at the terrain, you know, we're looking at slopes from 8 to 40%, you know, on that property. And it's tree covered, and if building it at a density that the applicant is proposing to rezone it, it would be very difficult to preserve a lot of those values that the city has identified. It would be much more easy to preserve a lot of those values if we do it at 8 houses, I think, or thereabouts, that would be developed currently under the zoning regulation. And I did have a question for staff about that road, that cul-de-sac is going to be approximately 2,500 feet long, or is that an issue, especially when you're looking at that kind of distance and the trees and the terrain, that some of those homes could get blocked off in a storm, and access by emergency vehicles could be a problem?
Well, the proposal here is just for a rezoning, so we're not looking at development details. So would encourage the commission that's certainly something we'll look at if this gets approved and development comes through.
Whether it's at an RA or a R2, that will be looked at.
Right.
Good. I wanted to make sure that that was a concern. I think I don't have any other questions at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we deny the rezoning RZN 15-5004. I have to say, personally, I fully agree with all the comments of Mr. Fulcher and the opinions of city staff.
I have a question, actually, Mr. Chair. Is that, can we deny or do we forward with the recommendation?
You can
If you deny it, then they can appeal and take it, but if
Okay.
they don't, then it doesn't go anywhere.
Just checking, sorry. Second.
Well, before we take off, I'm going to be a little bit of a spoiler here, I think. Our population in Northwest Arkansas hit 500,000 people this year, and we've all seen the problems that annexation brings to a city, having to expand services. As you open up the footprint of the city, you have to expand services or whatever, and residential basically taxes the city. In fact, I learned that from Commissioner Cook here, okay? And so we're in a little bit of a conundrum because in this town, we've got lots of hills, we got wetlands, we got lots of UA-owned property, we got a lot of city-owned property, we've got hillside overlay district, we've got the streamside protection ordinances, we've got all these things that make what land we have within the footprint of the city somewhat limited, yet we still have to have room to grow. Okay, so we have an option. So we either promote density within the footprint of the city that we have now and leave the rural stuff for the county, hence the cows that Commissioner Chester was talking about earlier. And so we're, like I said, we're in a little bit of a conundrum. I don't think that 2 units per acre is unreasonable for this property. Especially, I think this property is also in the HHOD, isn't it? Andrew, Jesse?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the development they do on that property is going to be very limited anyway. It's going to be very, very controlled besides. I don't know. It's kind of a spot for me. While I'm all about the transect zoning and the ideals we've laid out for the city or whatever, we also have other ideals that promotes infill, discourages urban sprawl, and the list goes on and on and on. And so the problem is where do you draw the line? Well, unless we want to expand the city and give us more room to grow, you know, we've got some issues to figure out. So I'm going to take the unpopular side of this, and I'm actually going to support the rezoning. Anybody else?
I'll make a comment.
Oh, boy, how did I know you would, Commissioner Cook?
Well, I don't disagree with you in a lot of ways, but I think we also have several planning documents that show that we see this as designated as a rural area, and certainly see what Commissioner Chester's saying also.
Right.
You are correct that it is in the city limits, but it's right on the edge of the city limits there, and thank you for making those comments about annexation. I appreciate that. I think I'm going to agree that I think my recommendation to city council is to deny this, but they may see this totally different. But the documents that we have in place now that changed in 2011 or whatever the date was, say that we see this as a rural area.
Okay. So we did have a motion on the floor, and we had a motion to deny by Commissioner Hoffman, and I apologize, but I have failed. Who was the seconder? Commissioner Chester. I'm sorry, Commissioner Chester. And a second by Commissioner Chester. Mr. Garner, please call, if there's no more discussion? No more discussion? Okay. Mr. Garner, please call the roll.
Hoskins?
No.
Chester?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
The motion passes.
I told you I was on the unpopular side. Okay. Thank you, sir. And of course, he'll figure it out.
He knows the rules.
He knows the rules. Okay.
Should be
It'll take just a couple of seconds, let the place clear out.
I figured all of them would have been here for Walmart. I figured all of them would have been here for Walmart.
You know what, I did too.
Me too.
I did too, I figured, I saw it with the eyes, I thought, Walmart's throughout. That's kind of funny. The last thing, y'all, I was the only man out. Got approved as city council. It was Walmart.
You didn't vote that way.
I know, I had to, excuse me, my mistake, sir. See, you guys all thought I was trying to trick you. Okay, here we go. All right, the next item on the agenda, excuse me, is rezoning 15-4965 submitted by the planning staff for property located at the south end of Rupel Road. The property is zoned RA Residential Agriculture, RSF 8 Residential Single Family 8 units per acre, RSF 4 Residential Single Family 4 units per acre, RSF 1 Residential Single Family 1 unit per acre, and contains approximately 642 acres. The request is to rezone the property to NC Neighborhood Conservation, CS Community Services, UT Urban Thoroughfare, and RA Residential Agriculture. Mr. Garner.
Sir, as background for the commission, the city will be constructing an extension of Rupel Road from where it dead ends currently adjacent to Owl Creek Elementary School, about 1.5 miles south, down to Martin Luther King Boulevard. The project is intended to start this summer or fall and be finished by the end of the next year, 2016. This has been a planned street project for at least 15 years. It's been on a master street plan as the long anticipated northwest connection along this side of town, extending all the way from Martin Luther King, eventually all the way back up to the mall, to allow the communities on this side of the interstate to move north and south, to go in between the commercial services at Weddington, Martin Luther King, and all the way up to the mall and the hospital area. Staff has been talking to several developers and property owners that own land in the area of the proposed road extension. They're interested in developing the property after the city builds the road. It will really open up a lot of this undevelopable land at this time with a new road. In addition, as background, after the city approved the street cross-section of Rupel Road, several city council members expressed to the mayor's office that they wanted staff to look at a rezoning proposal for this entire area. And so that's why we're before the commission. We're proposing to rezone this entire area, 642 acres, so the commission and the council can look at the entire area as one comprehensive zoning, as opposed to piecemeal rezonings that would come through by developers over time. As you get yourself familiar with the site, if you're not that familiar with it, it's flat land, mostly on this just south of Owl Creek Elementary School, and the area for the rezoning, it extends all the way west to Broyles, and then down here in between these two existing neighborhoods. And the proposed zoning, I'll pull up the zoning map. We're proposing community services along the road corridor. This would allow for a mix of uses. It could be residential, it could be non-residential, it could be multifamily, and then we're proposing to contain that along this corridor, which would potentially allow for the extension of higher density residential uses like you see north along Rupel Row. It would also allow for some non-residential services and goods for the surrounding neighborhoods. Adjacent to Martin Luther King, there will be a new signal, and we feel like this is an appropriate spot for urban thoroughfare, which would allow for some regional commercial uses. It would also allow for multifamily uses and single-family uses as well. A majority of the area is proposed to be rezoned to NC Neighborhood Conservation. That's a single-family zoning district, would allow up to 10 units per acre. And the remainder of the land, which is in the floodplains, we're recommending that be rezoned to residential agricultural, which will hopefully encourage preservation of some of these areas or lower density development patterns. And this entire area was identified by the Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association as having high environmental quality. in their previous study, and so the city has used that study when we generated our future land use plan map. And then the future land use plan map shows a lot of this area as natural area, in particular the areas along the floodplains where we're recommending it stay low-density residential agricultural. So that's why we're recommending that higher density areas be concentrated along the roads, and then around the riparian areas that have been identified as good environmental habitat, we're recommending that stay low density. The overall intent out here is to have a neighborhood where you could, where residents on this side of town have goods and services that they could walk to. This particular area is based on a 10-minute walk, so people at neighborhoods out here in the far periphery could potentially walk in here for some non-residential goods or services. And the magic number for transit is about 8 units per acre for bus service, and so that's what the target we're trying to hit. That's one of our goals as well, is to encourage transit-oriented development patterns. Along with the city's boulevard project for Rupel Road, we will be building a multi-use trail along this west side here. It's kind of this yellow line, so there will be pedestrian and bicycle access through this area as well. Through the rezoning process, we've notified all of the existing property owners that own land in this rezoning area. All of the property owners that I have talked to are in favor of what is being proposed for the most part. I did get some concern from one property owner that there was maybe too much residential agricultural proposed on their property, but for the most part the feedback has been pretty good. And similar, the surrounding neighbors that I've talked to on the phone and in person have generally been in favor of the proposed rezoning. I did get one call today from a neighbor that was opposed to the rezoning down here along her property. She lived in this Magnolia Crossing neighborhood, and she was concerned that the urban thoroughfare zoning was going too close to their homes, which in fact it does. There's a few homes there that would abut directly to where we're proposing that zoning. Other than that, the feedback has been mostly positive from the neighbors that I've heard from. And we're recommending tonight for the commission to discuss the item, for the public to have an opportunity to speak, and then we're recommending it be tabled and discussed again at your next meeting so we can have plenty of time for comment and discussion. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garner. And is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this item? Okay. If you will, give us your name and comments.
Okay, I'm Chelsea Cross. I'm a graduate student at University of Arkansas, and I'm coming here today to tell you about a little bit about the site history and some of the things we found, because I actually work at Woolsey Wet Prairie, which is adjacent to the rezone, or the property up for rezoning. Excuse me. So if you could, I'm sorry, can I have some pictures and stuff. Am I allowed to give these to you guys, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Never done this before, so. So if you look at the map of the property being rezoned, you see little circles that are lightly colored. Those are actually prairie mounds, and it's indicative of the historic virgin prairie habitat that hasn't been plowed. And the great thing about this prairie habitat is we have some, and it's a really rare habitat here in Arkansas and in the United States, with only about 1% of prairies being remaining intact. We have a really good example of a restored prairie through Woolsey Wet Prairie Sanctuary, and just as an example of the success of Woolsey Wet Prairie, we've documented, multiple people have documented plant species diversity, over 450 different species. Many volunteers and citizen scientists have eBird accounts, and they have this property is now an important birding area with over 200 documented bird species. And some people might not like this, but we've documented 24 amphibian and reptile species in the area. So this is actually, this property is adjacent to Woolsey Wet Prairie. It helps maintain connectivity to this riparian areas that you mentioned that are being zoned for residential agricultural. So just another point, if you look on this page, you can see that there's a lot of educational and public use of Woolsey Wet Prairie from University of Arkansas, as well as the kindergarten through 12th public schools here in Fayetteville. So on to some of the, probably not your favorite, but the reptiles and amphibians. So we've found 24 reptile and amphibian species. 2 of those species are actually Arkansas State of species of greatest conservation concern, one being the Graham's crayfish snake, and one being the crawfish frog, my personal favorite. This Graham's crayfish snake is the only known population to exist within the Boston and Ozark Mountains, and they were last documented here in Fayetteville 60 years ago. So it's been a while, but we've actually caught 200 within the last year. They're really cute snakes. I know they're not your favorite, but they're really cute. And they're actually, so they're the only known population to exist here. The crawfish frog is a really cute frog. There's a picture on that page right here. If you go out in the beginning of winter, or I mean not beginning of winter, but beginning of spring, end of winter, you'll hear snoring, and they're a snoring frog. And they are a species of greatest conservation concern here, as well as in Kansas and Missouri, and they've been listed as state endangered in Illinois and Indiana. And one thing that has led to their decline is habitat degradation and loss of habitat. But at Woolsey, we've documented large breeding choruses, as well as individuals crossing from Broyles Avenue from that adjacent property. So when I'm here, because I want to stress to give some important considerations for conserving reptiles and amphibians at Woolsey, while you guys consider how to rezone this property. Ephemeral aquatic habitats, so ponds that dry once a year, are really important and deserve protection considerations, not just maintaining permanent water sources like farm ponds, retention ponds in the streams. Also, connectivity between suitable habitats is key, because many of these species are probably crossing over from streams, crossing Broyles to get into Woolsey, breeding there, and then coming back. So what might seem like an empty field of grass and not exactly the prettiest thing could be a really important hibernacular or post-breeding feeding area for animals here in Fayetteville. So with that, I just wanted to keep these considerations in mind in the future when you're thinking about developing this habitat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else?
Hello, my name is Megan, and I live in the Magnolia Crossing property on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. My concern is with the urban thoroughfare, and also that part of Jasmine Lane is a flood zone. I'm concerned about what will happen with additional concrete. I would love to keep the wetlands and save the snakes and the frogs. That does not bother me one bit. I enjoy having the field behind my home. I also am concerned about noise and the potential properties that may be coming in, the businesses, what may be coming into the urban thoroughfare versus the community services. I'm trying to think, I had a couple points. If we could possibly extend the neighborhood conservation a little bit further down so the remainder of the homes in Magnolia Crossing on Jasmine would be not considered behind the urban thoroughfare, I'd be greatly appreciative. But my main concern is the flood zone and what will happen with the added properties behind Jasmine Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Jeff Hickle, and I wanted to add to some of the highlights of the environmental and habitat value of this area. So, would it be possible to flip over to the Google Earth screen? Okay, so first of all, the area that's being considered for rezoning is the origin of 3 local creeks that eventually all feed into the Illinois River. So there's Owl Creek to the north. It's the largest of the 3 and pretty well defined by that point. Goose Creek is another one that on the west side of Broyles Avenue becomes fairly well defined, but arguably extends east into this area. And it's where it originates. And then 3, I believe it may be an unnamed tributary, possibly Double Springs Creek, originates towards the south, maybe just north of the elementary school. So one point that I wanted to just share with the group is that these water bodies may be small enough at this point, since this is an origination point, that like the streamside ordinance just may not recognize them as a creek at that point, but you know, future development and impacts to that land will inevitably, you know, have a downstream effect. The second point I wanted to just kind of also emphasize the unique geological features there, the prairie mounds. This image, if we zoom in maybe just east of the 648 sign. Yeah, so right there and kind of, you can see this orangey shaded areas with the tan tops. You know, those are all not only unique to this area, but there's very few places in the country or even the world where this is found. You've just got a soil stratification, topography, or a mixture of soil stratification, topography, and hydrology that all play together to really make possible some just wonderfully diverse plant communities and wildlife communities. Woolsey Wet Prairie, just as an example, which is, you know, just to the west, over 450 species of native plants documented, arguably not any other place in the state, arguably maybe even in the 4-state area, with that level of plant diversity. 3, I wanted to just throw out the idea or the possibility of future kind of educational opportunities. So to the north, we have the Fayetteville Boys and Girls Club, which, you know, is kind of there towards the beginning of Owl Creek. And then if you go down south, there's the Pop Elementary School, I think I've got that name right. Yeah, and so, you know, just imagine, instead of limiting the agricultural, maybe residential zone, sorry, I don't know if I got that name right, but, you know, rather than limiting to that just to the immediate vicinity of the existing streams, if that was actually expanded out to kind of include some of the watershed that's feeding into those and creating those streams, and having a, you know, a continuous corridor from those 2 points where, you know, public education, again, elementary school kids would just have wonderful access to kind of an outdoor living classroom. A last consideration just with future development is the close proximity of Woolsey Wetland. One of the major components of its success has been removal of invasive vegetation. So it would just be worth, you know, keeping in mind with future planning that the reintroduction of potentially invasive vegetation and, you know, landscaping and whatnot could, you know, impair the integrity of that wildlife sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I'm Charlie Sloan. I'm one of the owners of the property out there we're discussing. The part that Owl Creek goes through, I own it. We have been working on this project for 10 years that I've been involved with this. From the original design, Rupel Road, which I went and visited with the neighbors, and we talked about word placement with the city engineer, how to put the road down, move it off the hillside. We have worked with supporting the multi-million-dollar treatment plant that was involved out there. I was involved with the school the land being sold to the school and relocating to Owl Creek School. This area was always been, from what we understood, to be for development, residential development. I've worked with the Parks Department. They were working with land dedication for a neighborhood park out there. Trail system, worked with Matt. Matter of fact, the thing has been staked out for years for the trail to go along Owl Creek to keep extending. At one point, with other partners, I had a contract with the city to buy the property north of the Woolsey preservation area, which we backed out of to allow that expansion for that preservation area. Like I said, we are in support of the zoning that the Planning Commission has worked with. They've been kind to talk to us and look at what we've worked on for 10 years to lay out over there. We agree with what they're doing. Not that we will be that dense, but like I said, I don't know what else to tell you other than that I live out there with those snakes and the frogs and everything else. I've only have black king snakes that come up to my house that I've chased out of there that I know of. And one beaver that I love, see him out there in the creek, in Owl Creek. He builds a dam every year, and last year or two they came through and expanded the sewer out there and took his little domain out, but he came back. So we do, like I said, that area is designated, and we plan on keeping that green space, that green belt through there to be part of the parkland area that we worked with the Parks Department. So other than that, it's been just basically a hay fields that have been mowed for ages, for at least the last 10 years I've been involved with it. And it used to be an active working farm, and then other than that, it was converted back to just hay fields on the property that I've been involved with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Phil Vogrens. I'm a citizen of Fayetteville. And I just wanted to point out some unique aspects of the property that we haven't touched upon yet. Although it is a field, this property has a seed bank, and it shares the same seed bank as Woolsey Wet Prairie. Okay, so these seeds that haven't flowered or produced for over 100 years still lay dormant, and they can come back with restoration. There's a few things I wanted to touch upon, which is just that this property is originally tall grass prairie. There used to be 114 million acres in the United States. It's approximately the size of the eastern United States. What's left is about the size of metropolitan Houston, Texas. Okay? There's not a lot left. Wetland habitat in Arkansas, there's approximately 9.8 million acres. There's only about, I think it's around 2 million acres left in Arkansas. We have destroyed more wetland acres than any other inland state in the country, as the state of Arkansas. I know we're all concerned about these things. We want to develop the city, and we also want to keep green spaces. I think we all appreciate that. I think because of the things that we've talked about today, the potential for this property, the unique species, in my opinion, it would be better to develop property on top of Mount Kessler in Devil's Den State Park, the National River, the Buffalo National River, or any other state or national wildlife area in Arkansas, because those forested Ozark habitats do not contain the same amount of biodiversity as this property does. Tallgrass prairie, or wet prairie as it's called, it's a combination between wetland and prairie, has equal to or higher biodiversity, so number of species, as rainforest. Okay, this is scientifically proven, okay? So it has very high potential. And I think we all cherish that biodiversity. However, if this property is developed, I just would like to ask the city and the landowners to consider a new way of developing, okay? And I realize that within the Fayetteville's Vision 2020 guiding principles, number one is a naturally beautiful city. Our mountains, our hills, our creeks, and our open green spaces. That's important to us, as well as we discourage suburban sprawl. Now, if this property is developed, I think the main objective should be, can we develop the property with a conservation perspective? More specifically, can we develop this property and also sustain the ecosystems and populations of wildlife that make the city of Fayetteville and Arkansas, the natural state, beautiful and something that we're all proud of? The past answer to this question, can we do this, is no, I don't think so. The approach to prior adjacent development projects have left no chance for sustaining ecosystems. If you look at some of the developments to the north of the proposed developed project, it's just house upon house upon house. How can we change this? How can we relieve remaining ecosystem habitat? Okay. Fortunately, the University of Arkansas lies just a few miles away, where there's many young citizens who work very hard every day to make a difference, who trade ideas and have great ideas for development. As a Research One institution, I believe collaborative efforts exist for cutting-edge sustainable conservation planning. And I respectfully ask the city and the landowner to take this into account in these planning developments strategies. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I'm going to ask everybody to, if you can, no, go ahead, step on up, sir. I'm going to ask everybody to, if you can, try to keep your comments as brief as possible and try not to repeat the people in front of you, okay?
I'm Gerald Teague, and I'm representing my mother, who is a property owner in the affected area. And we want to go on record as supporting the rezoning as proposed. We have owned the land for over 50 years, and in that 50 years, it has been a farm. We have utilized it as a farm. One of the orange areas referenced, and we have pictures of it, it was plowed, the mounds were leveled to aid in farming operations. So it has been treated as a farm for over 50 years. And that ship has already sailed. We have pictures where it was plowed, and we leveled the mounds to aid in farming, because that was the way we made a living, was farming. So we want to just go on record as supporting the rezoning as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, could you state your name again for the record?
Gerald Teague.
Teague.
Doing? Matthew Wright. I'm a citizen of Fayetteville. I live in the Walnut Crossing subdivision, which is in the south end of the map over there. And if you could turn to it, there's an issue that you may not be aware of. So I am no longer a police officer, but I was here for 7 years. Every night to get to that neighborhood, which is right there, you're zoomed in on it, you either have to violate city policy by asking permission. You have to request permission to leave the city limits of Fayetteville, to go into Farmington, to go back into the city of Fayetteville. I know this because I probably violated about 3 times a night, going out to my neighborhood to patrol my neighborhood. But that is the only entrance to and from the city of Fayetteville, unless you go through the other way of Weddington. Depending on the beat map that is currently used in Fayetteville, that's the only way to get there. So it would alleviate a problem of having city vehicles leaving the city limits, going into another city to go into a neighborhood that goes back into our city. So I'm for the Rupel cut-through. I think that'd be great. However, I do agree with the rest of the environmentalists where if we could get maybe the left half of that towards the, in between the two schools basically, we could keep that farmland or what it is now, that would be awesome. I enjoy the deer in the morning. I live in the very, very corner of that subdivision, so my land backs up to farmland. I enjoy the back porch view of nothing but wildlife and scenery in the morning. But I am for the Rupel cut-through because I think it would alleviate a lot of traffic going through Farmington, make it easier for me to get to Weddington, and I wouldn't have to go through Farmington to get there. not to mention the city issue with the police department. That's one thing that hasn't been brought up, and I just felt like it should be brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Chesser.
I definitely see why staff wanted to table this, and I totally agree with it. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a member of the public a question. How does the chair feel about that? That has spoken to this issue?
Sure. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's fine.
City attorney have anything to say about that? Is that okay?
Ask away.
I don't know who wants to address this, maybe the first person who spoke. Mike, yeah, that'd be great. Also, I did notice that this one, in the gray, I didn't catch her last name, and I don't know if that needs to be on the record either. Andrew? Yeah.
Chelsea Cross, is that right? Oh, no, Megan Miller.
That's close, though.
Other person in the gray, sorry.
We're close.
I appreciate you guys coming out and speaking to this. Here's my question, and might be something you think about for next time. I heard a lot of really good arguments about wetland prairie. What I didn't hear is, and I hate to put this bluntly, but what do you want? I mean, are you asking that? That's the thing I was at a loss for. I didn't hear you say, well, we don't want Rupel Road to be connected. I think that the property is probably already zoned residential agricultural, is it not, Mr. Garner?
Yeah, a majority of the site is zoned for RSF1, which allows 1 unit per acre.
And the proposal would be to change it to a lower density, is that correct?
No, the proposal would significantly increase the density.
Along that corridor, but the green zones to the outsides.
That's 10 units per acre, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, the neighborhood conservation.
Oh, I'm
planning would
sorry.
be a high
All the
density.
green would be much higher density. Okay. So, there. So my assumption is that you're asking for it to, I guess, remain the designation that it is, but I would love for you to tell us that part.
Okay, sorry, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I'm still learning
That's
the
okay.
process. So what I wanted to do today was present some information for you when you're making your recommendations. I understand that development is important, and I'm fine with a lot of what you're proposing. I just want more considerations for preserving more habitat that, other than permanent wetlands and permanent stream, thinking about ephemeral wetlands and maintaining some connectivity between Woolsey Wet Prairie and this, and the adjacent properties. So I really just wanted to give you guys some information for when you're making your zoning plans. If I had to choose, of course, I would not want this to be developed, but I understand that is part of our economy, and we need to grow, and we need to provide housing for individuals in the city.
So then my next question would be, have you worked with Mr. Garner or other city planners on this issue, or was this the first time you came to speak to this issue?
This was my very first time. I saw the red sign.
Okay. And so then I would ask that, I think it's important that you go down to the planning office
Okay.
and discuss this with staff, whom I think would be receptive to that idea. Mr. Garner, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I suspect there's potentially a way to have a meeting in the middle where everybody wins, assuming, I think probably that road's getting built, be my guess. But I'm glad that you've come to bring up these issues, and I think it's important that you talk to city staff about this before our next meeting and sort of make clear to them, maybe bring more evidence. Sounds like I'm guessing you're all science students of some sort.
I am a biology student.
Yeah, I could tell. So I bet you have evidence you could bring forward, and that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to find out. I wasn't sure. I got that you were pointing out that there's something to be protected, but I wasn't clear on what your desires were.
Okay.
So if you could make those clear to city staff, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cook.
I wanted to quiz staff on your UT designation. And kind of, usually, not always, but when I think of UT designation, I think of major intersections, and I can't remember if Rupel on the master street plan is technically supposed to go through. I can't imagine that it would geographically, but
Yes, Rupel? Yes.
all the way south.
All the way to 112, from Martin Luther King up to 112.
I don't know, south.
Oh, further than that?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there's a big
Oh,
hill
okay.
right
Yeah,
there.
it's not
So that's what I'm
proposed.
saying. That's what I'm saying. So typically, when I think of UT, I think of major intersections and development at those major intersection points. Obviously, in this case, Rupel's not going to go further south. And I kind of was curious what your thoughts were on why you guys put UT designation on that.
I think we were just thinking the potential for there might be potential for some regional commercial right on Martin Luther King. And I agree, it's probably not the best location really for a heavy commercial. One of the main constraints there is the stream that runs right through that area. So that's one of the reasons we pulled the urban thoroughfare a little bit farther north to get a little bit more flexibility for a potential commercial lot. If it were something like a chain store, a chain grocery, or a big box that right on Martin Luther King is really not too developable, in my opinion, just because it's so limited in size. But it could certainly be, I could certainly see us going on a lighter, just having that all be community services or something smaller if you felt like it was, the commission felt it was too intense for the area. It would limit the size of any building. The basic difference would just be that you would not be allowed to do any sort of auto-oriented development, like car dealers and gas stations and things like that. You can do a majority of the things similar. You cannot do a big box retail in a CS zoning. The buildings have to be a lot smaller. So it certainly,
We like that.
I can certainly see the argument either way.
I mean, there's some uses in UT I can certainly see in that location. There are some that make me nervous. Some of the conditional uses in UT would make me nervous at that location, but, okay. I was just curious. I want to pick your brain a little bit. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a motion to table? Or you got more discussion?
Mr. Chair, unless there is,
I just
looks like there is.
wanted to, applaud the staff for getting out front on this issue, and after listening to the citizen feedback, I can see where there might be some fine tuning and tweaking that might go on, and it is definitely, I agree with it, we should table it and take a closer look at some of the comments that we've received this evening and see if there can be some fine tuning. That's all I had.
Mr. Chair, I have one comment as well.
Mr. Hoffman.
Despite the name, I don't know if neighborhood conservation is an appropriate zoning for what I'd like to see, which would be a kind of tapestry, I guess, of conservation developments, clusters of buildings, aggregations, groups of buildings with, large amounts of acreage preserved in trust. So I don't know if that's possible under neighborhood conservation, but that's certainly something that I'd like to see, discussed.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, conservation subdivision would only be allowed through a PZD process. It would take quite a while. We could potentially, some communities have conservation subdivision ordinances, and where you have maybe an overlay district that is placed on a certain area in your community where there are high environmental habitat issues and things like that. And then if you are in those overlay districts, then you would have to develop in a certain criteria for conservation subdivision. At this point, we haven't really been directed to go down that road from council, but it's all these comments are certainly valuable from the commission on on where you see this zoning going, the development patterns that you would like to see in the area, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chester.
I move that we table RZN 15-4965. Do you want that date specific, Mr. Garner?
April 27th.
Until April 27th, which I believe is the next meeting of the Planning Commission.
Second. Okay. We have a motion to table by Commissioner Chester and a second by Commissioner Autry. Mr. Garner?
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chesser?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Last item on the agenda, runoff election.
That's why everybody came now.
I mean, actually, Mr. Brown.
Borrow your other pen.
I'm going to take this opportunity to run off.
It was here when I got here.
Excellent.
You're perfect.
Good, good
I
idea.
didn't even look.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
There's two in
I
there.
gotta take a picture.
What do we got?
You got chair, vice chair.
How about I just take,
One of each.
how about I take a picture and say,
Here, you get one of each.
You know, you need to move the green, at least the green buffer down, green buffer down by all the houses. They should at least have a buffer.
Oh, I've got an extra one here. There we go.
I'll take it.
We'll figure it out.
here, run off.
That great comes.
Don't peek. No peeking.
We have each. we
Mr.
have
Nobel?
Okay.
You have one of each?
Excellent.
Drum roll.
More to come. We got them all? No, I guess.
We have some precincts that aren't in yet.
How about that early
Tune in at
voting?
5 a.m.
Thank you. More to come. Anybody open them up?
Yeah, open them up, yeah, just help me second, vice chair over there, and
Well, I didn't feel like they had said. And help her out here because I'm sitting. It's like I got the best seat over here. The gatekeeper. Please look at the RA, please look at PCD, ways that we could, address it. So it'll be great. Hopefully she'll go over and understand. Oh, I think they will. At least learn.
Nope. I've never done that. One year, I'm using it now. Never used it. I'm using it now.
I thought that was a. And I love the fact that you brought up the transect, that issue again. And so you obviously, it's something that's.
okay, we have results of the officer election for 2015, for vice chair Chesser and for chair Bunch.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right.
Congratulations.
And as a reward for everybody, I have a memo.
We are adjourned.